So, what does it mean to write a good memoir? I think my answer might surprise you. For me, a good memoir means that you're using your components in the right way. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about the two major components of memoir and explain how you should be using them. If you don't use them this way, your memoir is going to be a disaster. More on this coming up. My name is Wendy Dale. I'm a Penguin Random House author and the founder of Memoir Writing for Geniuses. So I first became a memoir writing coach in 2008, and I started seeing the same problems in my students' manuscripts over and over again. Thousands of manuscripts later, I've come to understand that structural problems come about when you are using your components in the wrong way. So in your book, you have scenes and you have transitions. Scenes are where things happen. Transitions are what you use to connect your scenes to create a story. So let me give you an example of what happens when you don't follow the principles underlying scenes and transitions, when you mix the two up. This is from a former student of mine. On the train, I met a man who told me I was welcome to stay at his unheated squat. After a week in Amsterdam, I visited my father's family. My Oma and I would play Scrabble. She'd write Dutch words and I'd write English. She had a closet where at the end of the day, she'd hang our tulips upside down. She'd insist that we wash our underwear and hang it to dry. After a couple of weeks, I took a bus to Paris. Paris. My fantasy had been to learn the saxophone and play in the metro as a way to earn my living. My other goal was to hook up with a lover who was in Geneva and then head with him to India. Paris. I was so embarrassed that I couldn't speak French. The only sentences I knew by heart were Je vendrai un café, s'il vous plaît, and Marlboro Red, s'il vous plaît. Sorry, I don't speak French. I was starving because I was so fearful of restaurants, and even grocery stores seemed daunting. I went to the Louvre and was overjoyed when I heard the clinking of china and could smell food. A cafeteria. I didn't care about the Mona Lisa. At last I could eat without having to speak French. Okay, so what does that feel like to read? Well, this is a really short excerpt, and there's some really nice details in here. This is actually a really good writer. But if you do this for long, you're going to lose your reader. Why? Well, there's a lot of information here, and we don't yet have a story. So you may not have felt it in just 3 paragraphs, but I promise you, if this went on for 5 paragraphs and 2 pages and 100 pages and 300 pages, which is what I see happening in most people's case, this is going to lose your reader. It feels kind of messy. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of information. It's kind of just what this writer remembers happening. It's a little bit of everything, all the stuff that she did while she was in Europe. So right now you might be saying to yourself, oh, but I'm not doing this. And I'm going to tell you something you may not want to hear. You are doing this. I have worked with people who have come to me after working with multiple editors, and they are doing this. And I used to do this. I want to say that every manuscript I have seen, whether it has been reviewed by editors or not, has this problem. The problem is that someone has not learned what a scene is supposed to do for their book and what a transition is supposed to do for their book, and they're mixing the two up. And the end result is this feels like a lot of information being thrown at the reader. It feels like the writer remembering things on the page and instead of telling me a story. If you want to know if you are making this mistake, if your memoir is working, you can have a member of my team read your manuscript and point out any structural mistakes you're making. You can find more information in the description below this video. The first step to fixing this problem is understanding that anytime something happens in your book, your reader expects more. Let me repeat that because it's incredibly important. When something happens, you create an expectation in your reader's mind. They think they're going to get more of the story. If you don't give them more, your memoir is not going to work. So let me show you where that happens in this text. I've highlighted the sentences in which something happens and it creates this expectation that I'm going to get more, that I'm going to live through this with the narrator. On the train, I met a man who told me I was welcome to stay at his unheated squat. Okay, Do you feel it? Right there. Okay. And then what happens? Something happened and I expected more. Let me give you another example. After a couple of weeks, I took a train to Paris. What happens on that train? Okay, I take the train to Paris, and we're already in Paris, right? So there was an expectation that was created. Here's another example. I went to the Louvre and was overjoyed when I heard the clinking of china and could smell food, a cafeteria. What's going to happen at that cafeteria? I got the beginning of a scene. The writer set it up, and then I didn't get the scene. So that is the first problem that is happening in this text. The writer has set up a scene, promised me a scene, created the expectation for a scene, and not given me a scene. So here's the principle I want you to learn. When you talk about something happening at a specific point in time, your reader expects a scene. Your reader expects that we're going to live through this with you and something else will happen. This is not the case when the time in question isn't specific. So let me go back to this text really quickly and show you where something is happening. But because it's not happening at a specific point in time, it doesn't create that same expectation. So here, we don't have that same expectation. My Oma and I would play Scrabble. She'd write Dutch words and I'd write English, right? So here, I would do this, we would do that. This is not happening at a particular point in time. It's happening multiple times. So it doesn't create that same expectation. She had a closet where at the end of the day, she'd hang her tulips upside down. She'd insist that we wash our underwear and hang it to dry. Okay, other places where we don't have that expectation, my fantasy had been to learn the saxophone and play in the metro as a way to earn my living. That's also not happening at a specific point in time. This is a general point that the author is making. It's my fantasy to do this. What would create the expectation for a scene? One day, I went into the metro and decided I was going to play the saxophone. Do you feel how that's different? Do you feel how that creates the expectation that, okay, what's going to happen when you start playing the saxophone in the Paris metro? It's really important to understand the expectation you are creating. And the expectation is created when you have something happening at a specific point in time. When you do that, your reader expects more. They expect that they're going to get a scene. They expect they're going to live through this with you, and they expect something else is going to happen. When you start playing that saxophone, what happens? Something has to happen. Okay. There's something incredible about mentioning something happening. So try saying this to a friend. Oh my God, my daughter broke her ankle skiing last week. Then pause and say, how are you feeling about your son's graduation? So your friend is going to think that something is a little bit off. Why? Well, you started telling me a story. Last week, my daughter broke her ankle. Oh, really? Tell me what happened. But you didn't do it. So I wanted you to understand how this is just a natural part of conversation and it works the same way in your book. Okay, so you might say, well, that's a big deal. You know, your daughter broke her ankle, but just because something happens doesn't always mean you expect something more. So let me try this with another example. Last Wednesday, I went to Target and I bought myself some yoga pants. Oh my God, you know what my husband's doing at work? Wait, that is such a strange conversation, right? Because even though it's just you go to Target to buy yoga pants, well, if you brought it up and you know, last Wednesday, I went to Target and I bought myself some yoga pants, I'm expecting more. I'm expecting something to happen. I'm expecting you to tear your yoga pants or to lose your yoga pants or for something to happen with that pair of yoga pants. When you mention something happening at a specific point in time, your reader expects more. And this is especially true in your book, which needs to be filled with scenes. So let me give you a few examples of sentences that make your reader want more in your book. Specific point in time and something happening. That Saturday, we sat down for lunch. One Tuesday, my husband told me we had to have a talk. That day at 3 p.m., the school bell rang. Any one of those sentences tells your reader that something is going to happen, that you have started telling them a story, that you have launched into a scene. So if the next thing you do is move on to another topic, Your reader is going to be frustrated. Your reader is going to be confused. Your reader is going to wonder what happened to the story that you promised them. So this same expectation isn't created when you have an extended period of time. Every Saturday we eat lunch together. No expectation. Every Saturday we do this. You're done with the story. My husband and I have great talks on Tuesday afternoons after work. Again, you don't create an expectation. Now, maybe you want to know what they're about. What are those great talks about? But it doesn't have that expectation that I'm going to live through these great talks with you. We talk about politics and religion and love. The school bell rings every day at exactly 3 p.m. Okay, that's just something that happens every day. Again, that same expectation for something new to happen isn't created. So those sentences don't create any expectation, and they also don't create suspense. One of the things I want you to understand is scenes are the building blocks for your plot. Without scenes, nothing happens in your book. And without scenes, no suspense is created. So you can write things like every Saturday we would do this, that entire summer we spent it canoeing and swimming and fishing, but that doesn't create plot. You're just describing your life. So you can have that in your book, but be cautious of having only that in your book. So we've been talking about scenes. When you have something happening at a specific point in time, your reader expects more. So they expect for you to give them a scene. And a scene means that they are going to live through that moment with you. So by saying that afternoon at 3 p.m., the bell rang, I'm going to be expected to be transported to that school and live through that moment with you, and something's going to need to happen that day. So let me go back to the example I started with. Let's look at where your reader expects to live through this moment with you. So I met a man who told me I was welcome to stay at his unheated squat. Well, I want to be on the train with you. I want to live through this with you. I want to know what happens. This is a moment that I need to live through with you because you have promised me that. You've created that expectation. So you need to fulfill it. You need to give me a scene. You need to let me live through this moment with you. Another example. I went to the Louvre and was overjoyed when I heard the clinking of china and could smell food, a cafeteria. So now I'm going to expect to be transported to that cafeteria, eat lunch with you, and I'm also going to expect for something else to happen, not just that you're in a cafeteria at the Louvre. Something needs to happen. Now, what happens can be absolutely tiny. It could be something you realize. As I'm sitting there eating my croissant, I realize that Paris is the most beautiful city on earth. Fine, but something happened. So that is really important to keep in mind. You set up the beginning of a scene and something has to happen in that scene, and I want to live through that moment with you. So you might say to me, well, all of a sudden my book is going to become very long, Wendy. If I go through and highlight everything that happened at a specific point in time, and I have to turn every one of those events into a scene, my book is going to be 1,000 pages. You really have two choices here. First of all, you do have to turn every one of those into a scene, but they can be very short scenes. Scenes don't have to go on for 5 pages. You can write a scene in a paragraph. You can let me live through this lunch at the Louvre in a very short amount of space. So that's the first thing I will say. The second thing is you also have the option to cross these sentences out of your book. So that way you're not turning if you've already written this manuscript and it's already 300 pages and it's filled with writing like this that doesn't work. Another option for you is to take this writing out. If you're not creating the expectation, your reader is not going to be disappointed that you didn't fulfill the expectation because there was no expectation created in the first place. So your other option is to delete some of these sentences. What I actually suggest you do, if you haven't written much of your memoir, is to think of writing your book in a different way. When people sit down to write their memoir, they remember what happened, right? So they remember, okay, I'm on the train in Paris, and then I get off the train in Paris, and then I get a taxi, and then I go to my Airbnb, and then we spend the night, and it's so cold, and the next day we go have breakfast, and you're just remembering, which is not a story, which is not plot. So what I think you actually should do is before you write a chapter, you should ask yourself, what actually happens? Make a list of what happens. And then turn each bullet point on that list into a scene. If you do that, you are starting to write plot instead of recalling everything that happened to you. If you want some help with this, I offer a free 7-part class that teaches you how to structure your memoir from the ground up. You can get more information in the description below this video. If you want to learn more about chapter structure, I suggest you watch this video. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel. I'll see you next time. Take care.